Thank you so much for joining us for So You Think You Want to Do DRTV, an analysis of what it takes to do DRTV, costs and benefits. Have with us here today Lois Ephraim, who's Chief Creative Officer of More, and Janet Tonner, who's President of DDTV. Between the two of them, they serve clients like Shriners Hospital for Children, Wounded Warrior Project, Save the Children, No Kid Hungry, Campaign of Share Our Strength, and several others. So without further ado, let me turn it over to the experts. Lois, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here today. You know, some of you on this line have actually done DRTV. Some of you are newbies. Some of you have had great experience, no experience. And what Janet and I are going to do today is really give you a high-level picture of what it takes to do DRTV in this limited time we have available. So we're going to talk today about, you know, why DRTV can be so good for your organization. I think that those of you who are here probably have an idea of the benefits, but also the other question we want to talk about is DRTV right for you? Because saying not now might be just as important as saying, yes, I'm going to take the plunge, because this is not an opportunity for toe dippers. This is people who want to go all in and think long-term, not short-term. Janet will be speaking about the components of a strong DRTV program, because too many people are thinking it's about getting a spot on the air. We're here today to tell you what it really takes to do an integrated program to create a great sustainer file. We're going to talk about offer and creative. Again, that could be a several-hour session on its own. We're going to talk about what it takes to do some effective creative. Also, the media strategy. You do your creative, and where are you going to place the creative? And what's so important is you can have the best creative and a great network, but if you're not able to capture those donations, you have nothing. So Janet's going to talk about response channel management, and then the question of the investment. What is it going to take actually to move into this realm for the short term and testing and for the long term? So, you know, why DRTV? As so many on this call know, it is just a terrific way to recruit large numbers of monthly sustaining donors. And the thing is that in the times that we are in today, DRTV is the engine that is keeping organizations powered. When people have had to pull back on face-to-face and other channels and events, for instance, DRTV just keeps bringing donors in. Can also reach the broadest audience and often a brand new audience for you. And Janet will talk a little bit about the opportunities for in the media buying strategy. I have to say that DRTV is not brand. It is not about building your brand. However, it can definitely drive brand awareness and give your mission greater visibility. We have seen this with organizations that we've worked with, like a Wounded Warrior Project or a Shriners, organizations that didn't have brand awareness and are top of mind now. Obviously, it's going to create a long-term revenue stream with excellent ROI that can weather the down times. And I think we can all know on the phone that for many organizations, these are sort of the tougher times. And also there's sometimes a PR scandal or something that might happen. Those sustainers will keep you going. And then it obviously can increase your share of donor dollars in this very competitive fundraising environment. And at the end of the day, it's highly accountable and it's measurable, which is what Janet loves to talk about. So it also is a rising tide that lifts all boats. And so some of you on the phone today, I know you've had experience in this. You know full well that as you go on the air, you're going to see an increase in online traffic. And of course, now we're driving people to go to URLs and the website. People are keying in that name, going to the website, and you're going to see responses more and more online as well as on the phone. There's direct mail. We're seeing the cost to acquire a new donor. It goes down significantly with people who are on the air. Email response, event participation, local giving, corporate partnerships. Some organizations were begging for a corporate partnership, and now they can ask for a nice donation for that corporate partnership. There's PR. We've seen a lot with PSA and earned media opportunities, and also even planned giving and major gifts. For one of our clients, someone called up on the phone. After seeing the commercials, they gave $1 million gift. It wasn't from seeing one ad, mind you, it was from seeing many ads over the course of years. So you never know absolutely what the long-term benefits are going to be for DRTV. And then, you know, those are all the benefits. And, you know, there's a checklist that you need to be thinking about, questions you have to ask. before you go into DRTV, you know? And this is just a few, you know, does your cause have mass appeal? Is it something that everybody can somehow relate to? I'm not talking about all the prongs of what your organization does. Is there a simple, compelling cause that you were speaking to? Animal abuse, children with cancer, you know, disabled veterans. What is it? And it doesn't need to be over-explained. People understand it quickly. A 6-year-old could understand it. Is my solution simple? And is it life-changing? When I say life-changing, I'm not just speaking about people, I'm also speaking about animals, because a lot of people are just, you know, they understand that animals, dogs, cats have souls as well. So, but it has to be about changing a life. Is there a sustainer proposition that has worked in other channels? And I think this is especially true for folks who have been doing face-to-face. They have been pitching out there. They have been hearing what people are responding to. All that information can be very helpful when crafting a sustainer offer for TV. And so the next point is, can you develop a strong TV offer? Why are you asking for a donation? And what will the gift be used for? There's a lot of lovely creative out there sometimes, and you look at it and you're enthralled, but at the end of the day, if you haven't told them why you need the donation and why your monthly gift is going to make a difference, you're not going to succeed. And also, do you have enough footage to use, or are you going to start from scratch? And this is going to have an impact on your production budget. Many organizations have in-house creative teams that have done a beautiful job of gathering footage. Other folks want to send crews on location. And right now, with our limitations in place, you need to think about being very creative about how you're going to capture footage. And also, do you embrace the fact that DRTV is about getting response? Again, it's not about just building the brand, or it's not a documentary. This is about gathering response, and specifically a monthly sustainer offer.
Thanks, Lois. So you've heard about why DRTV is a wonderful investment, because it can bring those ever valuable sustaining gifts to your file. And you might have thought through Lois's questions and said, yeah, all of those seem to fit for me. Well, what's next? There's a lot of steps actually involved in launching a DRTV program, and we're going to talk about each of these at a very high level. Again, all of these could be a full deep dive, and if anyone's interested, please let Nick know, and we'll go further another day. But at the end of the day, you need a few things. You need that strategic message and compelling offer, as Lois spoke about. You need to produce some spots, and we'll talk a little bit about that. One way to test those spots prior to launch is a NeuroLab, and we can talk about that. You obviously need a media plan that's going to target a high prospect audience. You're going to need that response channel management. We need to have call centers. We need to have digital platforms ready and able to convert those leads into actual donations. We need to have strategies to thank donors, fulfill premiums, and at some point communicate downstream so that they retain and engage in your organization. And of course, the part that nobody really wants to talk about is all that data flow that's necessary to track this channel and all the reporting systems. And so we'll talk high level about those as well. So let's get started with creative, and Lois is going to talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, and like I said, oops, I hear an echo. As I said earlier, it's not just about the creative. There's all these, you know, there's everything else that goes into this, and this could be actually a couple-hour session. But I wanted to touch on, you know, some of the elements, and some of you have known them. They're not easy, but they're simple. And so as we look at the creative, you got to make sure that we have strong visual imagery. Will those visuals really grab my attention? Portraits. Not too busy, you know, if this is a visual medium, and a lot of people are actually watching, you know, with the sound off sometimes too. And so they're seeing those images, which is why the graphics also have to make sense. But as you, not just the images, but you have characters in your story that people can personally relate to. You know, a lot of times people are mirroring the characters. They can see themselves in their place. Maybe they're not Maybe they don't have a disability. Maybe their child doesn't have a disability, but they can imagine if their child has a disability. They can imagine what it's like to be a suffering animal. So you have to make sure that people can relate to that story. It's not about the head, it's about the heart. And number 3, you have to have need. So if there was no need to solve, then you don't need to be in DRTV. So it's really about what is the urgent problem I am trying to solve. And this is where you have to discipline yourself and say, I can't talk about every problem. It's going to be this, I'm going to focus on one. And this is where the discipline comes in as you craft that all important offer language. And then you have to look at the offer and the calls to action. Why do you need my support? What will my support do? And please tell me in the spot, not just once, but 2 or 3 times, what you actually need me to do. And please make it clear. Am I supposed to pick up the phone? Am I supposed to go online? You can do both. So you want to make it just very simple and easy, but keep emphasizing, why do you need my support? I can't tell you, I was recently watching a spot and I looked at it and it was just so beautiful and so engaging. I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to do because it looked like the problem was already solved, and it made me feel really good. And it was a really good PSA, but our job is to make the phones ring. And then this is what's interesting, before and after visuals. Now, those of us who have been in DRTV longer than we can remember, we've always known that need actually often works better than happy. And when I say need, I actually want to be very specific. This is about empathy-inducing imagery. So, for instance, one of our clients is Shriners Hospitals for Children, and the message of the kids is very hopeful, but those children are in wheelchairs. They are missing limbs. And so the images themselves are very compelling. And so it's really about the empathetic visuals, but also today more than ever, people really not want to see visually what the impact of their gift will be. So you think about the surgeries, Operation Smile, the before surgery, and the after transformation. We see it with other clients as well. And I think the younger donors are, when I say younger, we'll get into that later. Younger can be 60. You want to see what your gift will actually do. And so it's not about happy, but sometimes a side-by-side visual, or nothing is as powerful as a child telling their own story about how their life was changed. And interestingly enough, with Shriners, when you walk around the country and you say, I do work for Shriners, they go, is that Alec? Oh, Alec, because they know his story, they can relate to his story. They don't see him as a victim, but they do see him as a child who is in need, who has been helped. So the other thing is donor centricity. You know, how am I the hero in the story? This is not about talking about how great your organization is. Again, you can do that in mail, you can do it in newsletters, you can even do it in a PSA. This is about how the donor is the hero and feels like they are personally transforming a child, an animal, a vet, a person's life forever. And then if you look at the storytelling length, you know, can you tell the story in 120 seconds? You know, often some things are sabotaged, as we all know. If there was a raising of hands, if I could see your hands, you know, somewhere in the final editing process, somebody said, now there were those 3 points that we wanted to make, and make sure you wedge them into the spot. And you're like, there's too many messages. I would say that actually the story has to be in the first 40 seconds of a spot. 40 seconds, they need to understand why there is a great need. And then the rest of the spot, you're talking about how your gift is going to solve the problem. So it's about succinct storytelling. And then an incentive, I threw this in here because people want to know, does an incentive really make a difference? You know, people say all the time, do not send me that stuff. I have enough. I don't need that. But, you know, human nature is that if I'm going to get something as a thank you, and a way I can share my support, I might be more likely to call and convert to credit card. However, what we've been doing with clients is we actually are asking them on the phone after they call in and they're excited, would you like that blanket? Would you like that t-shirt? And actually a lot of people are saying, no, it's okay. I don't need that. So if you're asking, do I really need to do that? It's wasteful. You can test it and find out if in fact it helps improve response, or you give them the opportunity to opt out of it. Now, if I wanted to show you an example of a recent spot that was done. And what's interesting about this is this was just done in the time of COVID, which explains the beautiful set decoration behind Joe Mantegna. So in the time of COVID, we all know we can't go out and film people in their homes. They're like, stay away. So some people are like, you send me the equipment, I'll film myself. And then you have to say, okay, you can't dress the whole set. But in this case, for this client, we had tested a host versus no host, which I'm sure some people on this line are going to say, does a host really work? You test it. And for this client, disabled American veterans, Joe Mantegna actually performed better than a spot without Joe Mantegna. And also in the time of COVID, we couldn't actually go out and film a vet. So we actually had to do the whole interview on Zoom. So we wanted to show you how we took all the elements that I just went through of what makes a good spot. And then we had to kind of put this spot together with the constraints that we're currently facing. So just wanted to show this to you. And I can also put it in the chat if some of you are having a hard time, if it might be a little slow. So Janet's going to go ahead and play that now.
Hi, I'm Joe Mantegna, proud supporter of DAV, Disabled American Veterans. If this year has shown us anything, it's how important it is that we take care of one another.
I am a disabled veteran of the United States Army. I served 8 years. In 2003, I conducted a routine jump, and on that particular day, it was very windy. I smacked into another individual's parachute, so him and I collide. So here's me coming down, and here's the ground, and here are my legs, and I'm boom! And I was paralyzed on impact. I was a single parent. My son was only 1, and what was I gonna do? DAV has really changed my life. They have been there through thick and thin. It is so important to have the support.
There's never been a greater time to show your support for our nation's greatest heroes. Please call right now. Just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day, helps disabled veterans get the support and services they urgently need.
Having DAV in this moment, in this time of crisis in the world, it does give me, and it should give other veterans, a peace of mind.
Get this memorial DAV blanket when you call and give just $19 a month as a reminder of the sacrifice our nation's greatest heroes have made for you.
They take care of their veterans. That's what set them apart. In one word, they gave me my freedom back, and I'm so grateful.
Please join me in making sure this vital support never stops by calling now or donating at helpdav.org. Thank you, and God bless you.
So it's just this, again, that was a newer spot for this client. When you look at the creative execution with your production partner, you have to be thinking again, do I have a library of video, or am I going to have to do a shoot? And some organizations, yeah, some of you have creative departments and you've got these great stories already there that you've been shooting. I mean, more organizations have been investing with internal resources, and you might have something that can be used by the production company or do a shoot. And as I said, be creative in the time of COVID. You could do a remote or virtual, you could do a shoot, but just have to take precautions. So the visuals are going to have to reflect the current times. And this is what's really important, is just to really develop multiple concepts. We are big believers in our experience of being prepared to test different approaches, because as we know, we are not the donor. So how many people on this line would raise their hand and say, you know, the spot that we hated is actually the one that worked the best, and the spot I absolutely loved was the dog. And so that's why it's really important to have a couple. We usually recommend no less than 3 or 4 approaches, and you can test the price, you could test the host, test a completely different approach, one more urgent, one more positive, and then a variety of lengths, obviously 120s, 90s, 60s. The 120 is going to usually it's going to work the best, but some networks are going to take a 90 or a 60. And then also think cross-channel. Think about your spots for PSAs. Think about your video for social media. This is about storytelling. And again, many of you in the line know this already, but don't be thinking just about your DRTV. Think about video storytelling.
And Lois, one of the things you said earlier, and we have a question come in, was to use monthly giving offers that have worked in other channels. Do you find that some channels are more predictive of success in DRTV? So is a digital successful monthly giving offer more predictive than a telephone one, mail one, canvassing one, that sort of thing?
It just depends on the client.
Okay.
It really depends, because sometimes in face-to-face, it's a really high price, it's a higher price point, or it might be more like a child sponsorship offer, which would be different than a monthly partner offer, but it certainly is directive. We certainly hear the messages that are resonating with folks, and it gives us an idea of where to go with our testing. Did that answer the question, you think, Nick?
Yes, I think so.
Getting back to the fact that we are not the donors, we cannot, the gut is not enough. I can't tell you how, again, I've been in love with things that have just not been great. And some things I was like, eh. In this case, you can actually, this is a combination of art and science. So you have an opportunity to use neuroscience to guide creative. And if possible to use a NeuroLab, you can actually measure the human biometric response to your creative in order to really understand it, to measure, to make edits, to make sure that it is emotionally engaging. And so for the clients that we have worked with, we recommend doing this before launch, because again, there might be an image that you're in love with and you actually find it might be disengaging. And for those of you who wonder exactly what this is, the people can be wired up in the lab. You actually bring in a target prospect demo. You can do eye tracking to see where they're looking on the screen. Are they fixating on that lower third, or the mother's face? And then also a facial analysis. You can measure the respondent's emotional response. Are they sad? Are they happy? Are they confused? Also, you want to make sure that you're not making them think too much. So we can actually, in a lab, they can measure the EEG. Do you, are they thinking too much? Is their approach avoidance, too much logic there? And then what's really important is the emotional engagement. That's where the galvanic skin response comes in. And so there's actually pads on your fingers and you're wired up. And you know how you have sweaty fingers when you're really, really nervous or really excited. This measures the intensity of the emotional engagement. And then also there's an immersion band in a lab, and this directly correlates to the level of oxytocin in the body, which is your feel-good chemical surging through your body. So how immersed was the respondent as they're looking at the ad? And then obviously in a lab, you're going to be doing questionnaires, and how is the respondents, what they are saying, does it actually it doesn't match what they were feeling. And all of us have had our experience in focus groups where people say what they think you want them to say. In this case, you can say, do they really believe that? The biometrics say something different. So these are just different ways of, once you produce your spot, you've got all the elements to make it work. You're being nimble producing it, but what is the science telling you about the creative, and can it be improved?
Okay, thank you, Lois. I'm going to turn your attention now to the media buying. And one of the things that we're looking at is who are we targeting? Get this question a lot. And generally, our target audience is the 50+ viewer. Now, of course, you would probably come to me and say, Jana, but I want younger. Right? Well, I understand that desire to have a younger audience, but let me tell you why we pick this audience. Number one, they watch the most television, right? I can't make people watch TV, although I'd certainly like to be able to. And COVID has certainly helped us because viewership is still much higher than normal. But at the end of the day, who's watching television? The blue bars on this graph is hours of TV per day. And you can see here in the 50 to 64+ range, they're averaging a little under 6 hours a day. And this is the most recent data that Nielsen has come out with. And my 65+ audience is watching over 7 hours of television a day. Now we can talk about later if you've got questions about watching TV on the internet and connected TV, and you can see that those things are also happening, but they're in smaller proportions. But for now, let's focus on linear television. So I found the audience that watches the most television. The other piece about this is they also happen to be the more generous of the generations, right? If you look about the boomers and the matures, and those are these folks here on this graph from Target Analytics, they're most likely to give. 75% give of those who are 55 to 73, and 78% give of matures. Not only do they give, more likely to give, they give more, and they give to more charities. So they're the most likely to become a sustainer. I don't have the data showing here, but they also are more likely to retain these age groups. As you get to the younger groups, their retention drops off a little. So not only are they the most likely to become a sustainer, but they're the most likely to stay on your file. So that's the reason we go after these folks. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to generate donors, sustainers who are younger, but they're going to be in a smaller proportion. We definitely find how people respond to the TV ads differ by age. So we typically see the slightly older of the range, so probably the 65 and older, are a little more likely to call. They're less trustworthy or less comfortable with the internet. And those who are younger are more likely to go online, especially through their phone. So again, we're going to reach a broad audience, but the ones who are the most likely to respond and give are this 50 and older. The good news is there are a lot of networks that appeal to this 50+ audience. In fact, they are probably the predominant number of networks. It used to be about 10 years ago, everyone was trying to reach that younger viewer, but they realized, especially as TV has become more fragmented and content is everywhere, that actually this 50+ viewer, there's a lot more of them. And so you'll see more and more content in more and more networks being generated specifically for that 50+ viewer. Now, the way we buy television is different than you might imagine, and I apologize for those who are already very familiar with this, but commercial advertisers get the first crack at advertising inventory, and they pay rates that are much higher than what we would come in and pay. We're coming in on the remnant time, what's left after they've already bought up what they want. And it's typically we buy a run of schedule. So we might say, for example, that we want weekdays between 12 and 2 on a particular network. And that's what's this run of schedule. And that's how most of DRTV is bought, because it's the best rate. Now, what we'll supplement that with is program-specific buying. So if we know we get the best response if we buy Law and Order on a certain network on a certain time, I can pay a little more and get that specific. And so we'll supplement that run of schedule with program-specific buying where it makes sense for you. And it changes for every different organization because of who is most responsive to their particular ads. And then the last piece of a buying budget is based on file sales and one-time opportunities. And what really matters here is relationships with the networks. It's really important for your media buyer to have strong relationships with the network, because that's who they're going to come to when they have a last-minute opportunity. What we do is obviously we're going, most buyers are going to start with the networks and day parts that they found have worked for most everybody. And they're going to start there. And obviously a lot depends on what is your goal. And a goal is really set by what is your tolerance for risk and how quickly do you need your investment to pay off. A standard is usually about a 2-year payback period, which I imagine for a lot of you is similar to your direct mail. And so knowing what your payback period is and understanding your goals will help us decide how quickly we can test into some of those larger networks, because the larger networks are going to have more viewership and usually a stronger response, but they're more expensive. So that cost per response is going to be a little bit higher. And so how quickly can we move you and scale you into those larger networks really depends on your goals. So what happens is we go out there and we put a media buy out there, we look at the data, we say what's working, and we're looking at it at a very granular level. So we're looking at actually a particular spot on a particular day part on a particular network. And we're looking at all of those and we're saying, what's working, what's not, where can we modify? And again, it's what spot. So as Lois said, we have 3 different spots usually that we like to start in a pilot. And then that way it gives us the best chance because one spot might work well on one set of networks and another spot works well on another. So it's really all about this testing, testing, testing. And with the hope that in a pilot, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, in 3 months, I've got a good feel for exactly what works for your particular creative and how big we could scale your program. Most of that is short form. We can also do long form, and long form is typically a 30-minute program, although you could have a 60-minute, but the majority is 30. There are different sets of inventory of who allows these 30-minute programs that you can buy. And so it's a little bit different, and usually in long form, it really matters what is preceding your program. So right, if you can follow news, we found that that works really well, or certain programs. So you want to make sure you're always looking at what's leading into your particular show. And it's also, we found really important to make sure that you're showing up in guides, whether they're online or printed, and most are online today. And so you can see here, this is just an example of, are you more interested in paid programming where you have no real idea what it is, or where you actually can see exactly what it's about with a picture and a story? So it's really important. This guide, even though people forget about it, it's a really important piece to long form. So that's kind of a very high, quick and dirty understanding of kind of how DRTV media is bought. I don't know if there's particular questions, Nick, or on that topic, or I can keep going.
And feel free to shout out any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll try to respond to them in real time.
So we've got our creative, we've got a media plan ready to go. There's an entire back end that needs to be set up before you can launch. And it's really important. As Lois said, you know, you could have the very best creative on the best networks, and if people call or people go online and you are not capturing and converting those folks, your program isn't going to be successful. Call center is one of the most important. Really, you can expect to see about anywhere from 40 to 60% of your responses, depending on your particular organization, coming in through the phones. And what we have found is most people, when they call in, don't think they're calling a call center. They think they're calling your organization. So how that call center represents you is extremely important. It's reflecting on your organization. We found it's very important to have somebody who actually has inbound call center experience. There are quite a few out there who do outbounds, but that is not actually the same skill set as taking an inbound call. So look for a call center that has inbound experience. You want to make sure that you're developing a script that is, number one, simple. You don't want to be too complicated, but you should have enough upgrade asks and add-on asks to make sure you're getting the most value out of each call. FAQs, you're going to get people, especially when you first launched, because now you've given them a way to contact you. So having a strong set of frequently asked questions will make the call go much smoother. And think broad, because again, you're going to get all kinds of types of calls, especially when you first launch, because they're, oh, now I have a phone number, I can talk to those people. You want to create this exceptional experience. So we want to make sure that the call center is set up and staffed appropriately to handle your call volume. So a staffing plan really matters. IVR and interactive voice response can help weed out robocalls that are more and more prevalent in these days. So they have to press 1 to get to somebody. We'll weed out a lot of that mess and leave the best kinds of calls for your experienced agents. Training the agent is really important, and we found incentive programs for them as very important. The training needs to be also not just about the scripts, but about your organization. So we like to share with them the spots. We like to share with them any kind of other collateral you might have that tells them who your organization is and why it's so important that they're helping you generate these donations. Sometimes little gifts, little tchotchke gifts actually are very, they like a lot. So there's easy ways to create very inexpensive incentive programs. It's very important for your partner agency to monitor the calls on a weekly basis, and actually even probably on a daily basis in a launch program, to make sure that they are giving feedback to the call center on how they can either better train the agents or change the flow of the script and how it's working. And then of course, tracking and optimization as you go. We found these two main goals are really important to set with the call center in advance, and share your expectations of how you think they can perform. Now they might come back and say, oh, no, I don't want a 3% abandon rate, but trust me, they can get there. They might not be there in the early part of your program, but don't let them tell you they can't do it, because they absolutely can. So they should answer 3% of the calls. I mean, excuse me, they should backwards, 97% of the calls they should answer. That's why, again, you can have hold messaging, you can have an IVR, and there's ways to do that, but that's really important, right? They can't get a donation if they can't answer the phone. The next piece is to convert, and typically what we say is 65% of all calls should be monthly donors. Some of those, about 50% should be an auto pay, an electronic payment like an EFT or credit card, and then you'll get some who want to pledge, and they'll want to mail in a check. But all of these are attainable. You just need to set your expectations clearly up front and then work with your the call center to get them there. The other piece is obviously digital. As I said, it could be anywhere from 40 to 60% calling. Well, the rest are going to come in online. So it's very important, obviously, number one, to put a URL in your actual ad. And typically we would say a vanity URL with your organization's name in it. Keep in mind that over time you're going to be spending millions of dollars on these ads. And so the more we can get your name out there, you can build up that organization's name through your URL. We want to make sure that a donation form has been optimized, very easy to use, and that it defaults to the monthly ask, because that is the purpose of your DRTV program. You should have a custom receipting that speaks to those who give you a monthly gift as a monthly donor, so the immediate receipt should happen and be customized. Obviously, we would hope that the majority will go direct to your vanity URL, but we know that, especially in the beginning, a whole lot of folks will actually end up on your main web page, either through direct or through search. So your search engine marketing support is very important to make sure you're using the keywords and phrases and things from your DRTV scripts and ads, so we can capture that and again get them to a form that defaults to monthly. Display and social is actually also very important, especially retargeting display ads. So all the folks who come to that site and don't convert, we want to make sure we're following them around until we can get them to convert. Text can work in a number of ways. Some could be an immediate thank you from the call center for gifts, or it could be a follow-up for those folks who visited or are on hold at the call center. Homepage real estate, as I said, a lot of folks are going to end up on your main page. So if you can put homepage real estate or have seen us on TV, anywhere to again drive them to that donation form with the monthly default. The other piece that's really important is if you are giving a premium to these folks, you want to make sure they end up on the form that has the premium offer on it. So it's also, again, homepage real estate will help and will also cause a lot less calls into your headquarters saying, where's that t-shirt, where's that blanket, I don't see it on the form. So you'll save yourself some distress there by making it really easy and clear as to where they can go. And then of course, as we talked about, we'll talk about a little bit more, is that ongoing communication, making sure we welcome them and get additional gifts and capture them so they retain. So Lois can talk a little bit about.
Yeah, because So Janet, it was, we did the creative, we did the media buy, we got their donation, captured all the information, and that's actually the beginning of the relationship. So that's all well and good, but if you don't keep these folks on the file and if they don't give again, there is no way you're going to pay for this program. It's about growing this file. They're going to be your best donors, but the way that you say thank you is more important than the way you asked for the gift in the first place. So it's really important that there's timely, gracious thank you letters and emails. Now people say, well, can I just do this all online? We really are big believers that they should have a physical package that goes out, as well as an email series as well. And as Janet was saying, there's a lot of folks who are calling with information requests, their leads. So you got to make sure that there's versions for people who are responding, but there's no donations, and check pledgers can be very valuable. There's a lot of folks who love writing checks, and those folks will often stay on the file for a long time and are often very motivated to give additional gifts. Now, we're big believers in having very specific acknowledgements. If people have asked for the premium, if they haven't asked for the premium, versions if they gave a one-time high-end gift, they're a sustainer, and it's really important for a lot of folks. If they're giving a gift in memory of someone or in honor of someone, you better make sure that you mention that in that acknowledgement, because they will never forget that you paid attention. So, and getting that packet out to them as fast as possible is really important. And we really like to have those letters go out actually with the premium. Sometimes people send them separately, and sometimes there is a delay. But if you can bundle them up together, that's great. And then what's really important too is to create the sustainer journey. So I know sometimes people are so anxious to get on the air. I know everything's done. We got the thank you letters, and then we're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with these folks when they actually come on the file? Let's just leave them alone. And you want to just say that what you want to do is make sure there's a journey. It's integrated across all channels. The email cadence, the messaging is really relevant to those folks. I don't know about you guys, but I've become a monthly sustainer with a couple of organizations, and they forget to mention that in all the emails that they're asking me for money. They're not mentioning that I'm already giving as a faithful monthly supporter. I get a receipt when my credit card is dinged every month, but I'm not getting a thank you. But the ones who are saying thank you for your monthly gift, they're the ones I feel most bonded to. And then, so we often recommend doing that sustainer journey per year. How many touch points are they going to get? How many direct mail appeals? We're not saying you send them 32 appeals. That's not what we're saying. But you need to have a strategic messaging and mail strategy. And then you're going to increase the engagement, the value. And these folks, when they have a satisfying experience, they're the ones who are going to eventually be your plan giving folks and your major donors as time goes on. So it's not about just getting them on board, it's about keeping them, growing them, and that's what's going to make your program successful.
Thanks, Lois. And then the part that's not so much fun but is highly important is the data flow.
It's fun for you, Janet, come on.
Well, some of us are data nerds, but regardless, you need to put it down in writing, map it out, because you're going to realize that there's things that can be easily missed. So there's connections between many different pieces. So it's the call center and a credit card processor, right? We would recommend real-time authentication when they call the call center. There might be a different EFT processor, or if you're doing e-check. Need an ECRM if you have that, or a database of record. How do I get all of those donations into those systems? Remember, some of the call center donations aren't actually donations yet. They're leads and pledgers. So do they need to go in, and how would they go in? Because at some point you're going to need to create mail files for whoever is doing your acknowledgements and fulfillment. You're going to need to be connected with the cage, because a lot of those check pledgers or even the acknowledgements might give you another gift. So all those connections to be able to track back all of the revenue back to DRTV. We actually recommend a specific DRTV PO box so you can help track all of that cage revenue. The media buyer is going to need all of the data on all of the different kinds of responses so they can optimize the buy and improve it. So again, the point here is to work through all of the different connections, and I would think it through from the beginning when somebody contacts your organization, whether it's by phone, by mail, or online, and walk through that entire step until how you're going to thank and acknowledge, and then of course there's the downstream. So working through all of those processes is very important, and it's a step nobody really likes to think about, but it's really the backbone of the program. So what metrics? Right, we've got to, the DRTV program needs to generate traffic, and then that traffic needs to be converted. So really you want to look at all of these things. You want to look at call volume, you want to look at the cost per call, you want to look at unique web visitors and even the cost per visit. And then of course, how are they converting? How many are converting, and what are those average gifts? And then it's really also important to look at, again, as Lois said, are they retaining on your file? And what is their subsequent giving? And am I getting additional gifts out of these monthly sustainers? They should be giving you a few extra gifts each year, one-time gifts. So we want to take a look at that, because at the end of the day, what this comes down to is how quickly is my DRTV investment paying off? And the way we typically do that is, again, to set up our cost to acquire goal. A kind of benchmark standard is if you've got a $19 ask, you're roughly going to receive actually a $24 average gift, because you're gonna upsell them at the call center, you're gonna upsell them online. And a $24 average gift usually can turn into $500 within 2 years. So if your donor long-term value is at least $500 or more in 2 years, if I'm at $24 a month sustainer, then that's your DRTV goal, right? Your vendor needs to bring in that monthly donor at $500 or less so you can pay back in that 2-year period. So having all of this data to track it is really important to see how well they're doing. So keep that in mind as we walk through a little bit more of this. Cost is one big one. What does it cost? Now, DRTV, as I think you may understand, it's not really a cheap investment. It's definitely something you got to think about for the long haul. We would typically suggest, and each vendor might be a little different, a 3-month pilot. And that 3-month pilot is really to see if we can make DRTV work for you as an acquisition channel for sustainers. And to get a feel for how long that might take, right? I mean, you need 3 months to see exactly what networks are going to work, how many networks work, is the 3 creative working, or is only 1 of the creative working? Is the call center actually converting? Is the web converting? All of those things happen in the 3 months. And so here's the breakdown of what that might look like. You're typically going to have anywhere from 45, this is just ballpark, 45K in setup and management fees to set up and manage your pilot. Media spend anywhere from 300K to 450K. You can do it in the 300K range, but it's usually you're going to take a little bit longer to read, and there's a little bit more ambiguousness. But if you have a little bit more, we can get those learnings a little faster. Spot production is very dependent on whether you have existing footage or they have to go out and film. So 250, maybe even 200K if you've got existing footage that is easily used, and 300K for the 3 spots if they have to start from scratch. And that's rough estimates. 25K in call center fees, right? The call center is going to charge you to set them up, to do training, and then there's usually a per minute fee. So that should cover you the setup and the 3 months. 15K in digital fees. A lot will depend on if you have a lot of in-house capability to do web development or you need to hire somebody. But you're going to want to have some SEM spend. You're going to have some advertising spend, some social spend. So that's a ballpark there. Premium, we recommend. We've certainly seen an increased response. Depending on what it is, it might be a little cheaper depending on what you might go for, but we've roughed out an estimate there. Acknowledgement fulfillment, set up a PO box. Maybe you can do this all in-house if you need to use a vendor. Postage, printing, and all of that in that 10K. And then obviously we need to traffic spot. So each spot needs to be edited with its unique telephone number and traffic to particular networks, that's about 10K across that. As we mentioned, you might want to do, if you've never done DRTV and you're not quite sure of what your brand awareness is to start, you might want to consider doing a brand awareness study. You might already have it in-house. And then we've also found that where we can support DRTV with PSAs, that you might want to do some cut downs of PSAs and have a PSA program running at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you put that all together, and what does success look like? And what I said is, typically in the pilot, we talked about this $500 cost per monthly donor or sustainer. That's not going to happen month one. In fact, month one, it might be that cost to acquire is as high as $1,000 or more. But what we're looking for is enough pockets of promise. So is there enough spot, day part, network combinations that are closer to that $500 range that if I continue to optimize, I could get your program to that $500 cost to acquire. Over the 3-month period, you should see a downward trend in that cost to acquire. So as we test and optimize, your vendor should be able to show you they can get it down to that range, or at least lower. It's also to see what are the best creative strategies. We talked about having multiple approaches, same offer, but multiple approaches to see, are there particular approaches that work better than others, and do we need more spots like that? It's a chance to test the channel performance. It might be that you're doing pretty well, but the call center needs to improve their conversion, and if they can get it there, your program will be more successful. And it gives you the opportunities, it identifies the opportunities for improvement. So the hope is that you do the 3-month pilot, you have all these signs of success, and then the decision is, okay, we believe we can get you to a $500 cost to acquire. Then the question is, how many do you want? And that's what determines your rollout spend. It could be maybe $1 million in a year of DRTV spend. It could be 10 million, right? That's really at that point how big you want to grow your program, and what is your goals and your plans. And that's kind of the high level. So what questions can we answer?
So while we're waiting for questions to come in, you talked a little bit about age being predictive of retention, and you talked a little bit about payment type being predictive of retention. Are there other variables that folks should be looking at to see, in the mix, I should be getting more of this type of person who will retain longer?
What we have found is those are the biggest predictors, but we really haven't seen dramatic differences, for example, in channel by retention. Your call center might be, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. In some cases, call center retention is a little lower. In some cases, web is a little lower, depending on the client. But for the most part, those are the biggest drivers. There's not a lot. What's typically going to happen is that some networks have slightly higher age ranges than others, and so again, because of the higher age, typically is higher retention. Some networks will have slightly higher retention than other networks. But again, it's really about, can I bring a mix of people on? And of course, your long-term value is really based on those gifts. So if I can increase the average gift, and that's usually happens in a slightly older audience, right? Younger audiences don't have the money in most cases. So they also tend to have higher long-term value, not only because they retain longer, but because their average gift starts at a higher level.
Janet, you might also want to mention that the volume is going up on mobile.
Yes.
For a long time it was desktop, and then it was device, and now we're seeing a shift to more mobile conversion.
And I'm sure that's probably true of any of you who understand your digital programs, right? I'm sure you're also seeing more and more digital traffic and conversion. And so it's really obviously important to make sure you're mobile optimized, and I'm sure you're already there. But yes, that is absolutely true.
Thank you. And then you talked a little bit about the younger donor being still 50 plus, which is significantly younger than we have on average for the male. What if a nonprofit comes to you and says, yes, of course, we'd like to bring in people who look like our current audience, but we'd also like to reach out to more diverse audiences, whether that's age ranges or ethnicity or race, political inclinations, those sorts of things? How would you go about that?
So I think there are some places we absolutely can target, right? Number one, obviously, Hispanic DRTV. We know a lot of organizations have found some great success in Hispanic DRTV. That does almost, though, take your current program and replicate it with everything done in Spanish. So and it's not just a pure translation, but because there's cultural differences as well. But keep in mind that that requires an entirely different setup, different call center, and so forth. So putting that aside, there are absolutely ways to target on DRTV in linear world, and then certainly on connected TV, which has the most specific targeting. But for example, I think we all can tell the difference just by watching, right, a Fox or a CNN, different political leanings, of course. There are networks that are more multicultural. Emerging Networks is a strong Indian Asian viewership. There's others like it. Now, there's not a ton of them, but they're absolutely there. So what we would recommend is, it's very possible you might want different creative approaches for certain networks. There are certainly networks that are targeted towards African Americans today. So we, as well. So there are definitely ways we can target, but also I would recommend supplementing with connected television, which is another topic on its own. But that allows you to target almost like you are digital, if not even more so, because most of when you sign up for connected TV, your devices require you to sign up and give name and address information, and then all of those platforms purchase third-party data and then associate all kinds of demographic characteristics with your name and address and household. So there's a lot of opportunity for targeting in connected television.
Well, thank you both very much, and thank you for everyone for attending. Lois and Janet, do you mind giving your email addresses so that people can contact you with any questions? Janet?
Sure. It's jtonner, Tonner, all one word, at directdonortv.com.
And I am L. Ephraim, EPHRAIM, at moredmgroup.com.
And if for some reason you need to reach me on Nick Ellinger, N. Ellinger, ELLINGER, at moredmgroup.com as well.
I guess for next time we should put our emails on the closing slide.
Yes, we did. We should have.
Learn.
Live and learn.
Just as we try to have,
we missed the call to action.
missed the call to action at the bottom,
Yes.
go to DirectTV, Direct Donor TV, and so on. But we'd love to talk with you more about these opportunities. If you have any questions or any comments, we'd love to hear them. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.